Hi there. Today I'm going to show you 5 seemingly normal photos, but each one hides a disturbing story you won't believe. First, the photo shows a man playing around with a tribe, and this story involves an extremely famous figure, Michael Rockefeller. He came from one of America's most powerful families. His father, Nelson Rockefeller, was the governor of New York and later became vice president of the United States. His grandfather, John Davison Rockefeller, was the richest tycoon in American history. This family had a tradition in politics and business, but Michael was different. He was passionate about art and primitive cultures around the world. In particular, he was fascinated by strange sculptures called beast poles, intricately carved wooden posts made by the Asmat tribe in New Guinea, created to honor ancestors and fallen warriors. Michael longed to bring back one of these poles to display in a museum he had founded. In 1961, Michael decided to make the journey to New Guinea, where the Asmat tribe lived. He and his group prepared a boat, bringing many items to trade. When they arrived, Michael quickly befriended the Asmat people. They played around happily, laughing and talking, and he even took many commemorative photos. Later, Michael asked them to let him take a beast pole back to America, offering to give them anything they wanted in return. But the tribe refused, because for them, these poles were sacred and could not be traded for material goods. Michael understood this and temporarily returned home, but in his heart, he still yearned to possess a beast pole. On November 19, 1961, he returned once more, this time traveling with just one friend and 2 guides. On the way, large waves struck, water flooded and causing the boat to break down and the engine to die. Looking around, they saw the shoreline was about 5 kilometers away, and the boat was drifting further and further out. The 2 guides jumped overboard to swim for help, leaving Michael and his friend, Rene Wassing, on the boat. They drifted for an entire day, until their position was more than 20 kilometers from shore. Michael told Rene, "We have to do something." He tied 2 gas cans together as a float, then jumped into the water. That was the last time Rene saw him. Later, Rene was rescued by a passing ship, thanks to information from the 2 guides. But Michael never returned. The Rockefeller family mobilized planes and boats to search for weeks, but it was hopeless. The authorities concluded that Michael had drowned, but the mystery didn't end there. In 2014, journalist Carl Hoffman wrote a book about this case, after living with the Asmat people to find the truth. According to the accounts, when Michael was exhausted near shore, he encountered several Asmat canoes. Initially, they pulled him aboard, but then took him to a deserted sandbar. There, a horrific ritual took place. They stabbed Michael with spears. Then someone took an axe and chopped his neck. Afterward, they divided up his flesh and ate it as a ritual of revenge. Why? The Asmat people believed Michael had insulted their ancestors when he proposed taking the beast pole away. Michael actually had no ill intentions, but to them, this was blasphemous behavior. However, the entire story only exists in the book, with no concrete evidence. So many people still believe Michael simply became exhausted and drowned. To this day, his body has never been found. Second, the photo is of a man burned all over his body in 1967. The character in this story is named Stephen Michalak, a mechanic who is also passionate about searching for precious minerals. Besides his daily work, he often spent his free time going to remote areas to prospect for metals like silver, gold, or quartz, hoping that one day he would find something valuable. On May 20, 1967, the weather in Manitoba, Canada was quite fresh, with clear skies. Stephen decided to go alone to Falcon Lake, a place he had heard might contain precious minerals. Around midday, while concentrating on his search, Stephen heard the sound of a flock of geese suddenly flying up into the sky in a panicked state, as if something had just frightened them. Sensing something unusual, he looked up and was stunned. In the sky, not far from him, were 2 strange disc-shaped flying objects hovering. They had a metallic sheen and glowed softly under the sunlight. After a few minutes, one flew away, while the remaining one began to descend and move toward him. When the object descended near the ground, he could hear the sound of metal clashing and a humming sound like an engine. From inside came strange voices, sounding like 2 people having a conversation. Being a mechanic, Stephen immediately approached and called out, "Do you need any help?" in English. No one answered. He continued trying in Polish, then Russian and German. Still silence. More curious, he moved closer and reached out to touch the metal surface. Immediately, he jerked back because it was so hot, forcing him to retreat. Right then, the disc rotated once. A round window appeared with a series of small holes. Just seconds later, an extremely powerful stream of hot gas shot out from there, knocking Steven backward. The clothes he was wearing caught fire violently. In panic, he had to remove his outer clothing, leaving only his underwear, then rushed toward the forest edge to find his way to a hospital. When he arrived, his body was covered with strange burns, perfectly round dots arranged in a pattern, exactly matching the design on the craft's door. After returning home, Steven drew the shape of the UFO, describing it in detail to submit to the investigating agency. This drawing later became one of the most famous pieces of evidence about UFO events in Canada. But the story didn't end there. From after the incident, Steven continuously suffered from headaches, dizziness, and nausea. He lost weight rapidly, and his burns wouldn't heal for a long time. Authorities investigated the Falcon Lake area many times, but found no traces. More than 20 years later, Steven passed away. Many people suspected he made up the story to become famous, while others believe this was one of the most authenticated UFO contact cases. To this day, the truth remains a mystery, and Steven Michalak's story still gives many people chills whenever it's retold. Third, this photo captures the image of a small life raft floating in the open sea, but behind it is a horrifying story that occurred in 1961. The main character is Arthur Duperrault, a hardworking man who always tried his best for his family. Arthur had a simple dream: to take his wife and 3 young children on a cruise around the Florida Keys and Bahamas, where there are beautiful coral reefs. This wasn't just a vacation, but also a nostalgic journey, because many years earlier, Arthur had been a veteran stationed in this area. After years of saving, by November 1961, Arthur and his wife finally turned their dream into reality. They chartered a boat called the Bluebell, along with an experienced captain, Julian Harvey. For convenience, Julian brought his wife along too. So the trip began with 7 people, the Duperrault family of 5, Julian and his wife. Everyone departed on November 8, 1961, in the excitement of a long holiday. However, just a few days later, tragedy struck. On November 13, a huge oil tanker discovered a lifeboat drifting in the ocean. On the boat was Julian Harvey, the captain. He appeared exhausted and recounted a horrifying story. A large storm had broken the mast, dropped the gas tank, causing the Bluebell to catch fire and sink into the sea. According to Julian, only he survived, while his wife and Arthur's family all perished. But the truth wasn't that simple. 3 days later, on November 16, another cargo ship discovered an unbelievable scene: a small life raft drifting, with a girl still alive on it. That child was Terry Jo Duperrault, 11 years old, Arthur's youngest daughter. The girl was taken to the hospital in a state of exhaustion and severe dehydration, but still conscious. When she recovered, Terry recounted the entire truth, and that story made anyone who heard it shiver. On the night of November 12, the Bluebell was still peacefully drifting on the sea. Terry was in the cabin when she heard strange noises. When she stepped out onto the deck, the little girl saw a horrific scene. Her entire family had been murdered, their bodies scattered across the boat's floor. The killer was none other than Julian Harvey himself. Then, he punctured holes in the boat's hull to make it sink, jumped onto the lifeboat, and abandoned Terry on the sinking ship. In desperation, the little girl found a small life raft and jumped into the sea. As the Bluebell slowly disappeared under the water, Terry had drifted at sea for 3 days and nights, without food or water, clinging only to fragile hope. And a miracle came when that ship discovered her. As soon as Terry's story was revealed, people searched for Julian, but everything was too late. He was found dead in a hotel, having taken life before police could arrest him. The investigation showed that Julian had bought life insurance for his wife, with a clause to pay double if death occurred by accident. Most likely he planned to kill his wife to collect the insurance money, but the plan fell apart when Arthur's family discovered it, forcing him to murder all the witnesses. Julian believed no one survived to accuse him, but he was wrong. An 11-year-old girl, alone in the ocean, had become the sole witness, exposing his cruel plot. And the photo of that small raft in the sea will forever be a symbol of a horrific murder case, the massacre on the boat Bluebell. Fourth, this photo at first glance just shows 2 men cleaning up a layer of ash on the floor, but behind it is a horrifying story that has caused scientific debate for decades. The main character is Mary Reeser, a 67-year-old woman who lived an ordinary life like many others. She had nothing remarkable except for her habit of smoking cigarettes and frequently using sleeping pills, things that weren't good for health at her age. On the evening of July 1, 1951, Mary returned to her rented house after a long day at work and visiting her son. The weather that day was humid, She seemed tired and just wanted to rest. Neighbors remembered that the last time they saw Mary was when she was sitting in the house with a cigarette in her hand. The next morning, July 2, the landlord brought a letter for Mary. She knocked on the door but got no answer. When she tried to open the door, she jerked her hand back because the door handle was burning hot. Sensing something wrong, she asked a man for help, but both of them increasingly noticed something abnormal. They immediately called the police. When police broke down the door and entered, they were shocked. The interior space was still almost intact, with no signs of a major fire, but in the middle of the floor was a thick layer of ash. In the middle of the ash pile was a tiny skull, about the size of a tennis ball, and a piece of leg bone still wearing a shoe. The results confirmed these were the remains of Mary Reeser. The scene amazed everyone. For a human body to be burned to ash, the fire must reach temperatures of 800 to 1,000 degrees Celsius, equivalent to a crematorium. But strangely, the room was hardly affected. The chair was only slightly charred. The walls remained intact. Surrounding objects weren't severely damaged. If you didn't step into the house, no one would think that a horrific fire had just occurred. Experts call this the phenomenon of spontaneous human combustion, a mystery with over 200 recorded cases worldwide. The most widely accepted theory is the wick effect, similar to how a candle works. When Mary was smoking while drowsy from sedatives, the cigarette ember could have caught her dress, igniting her clothes. The fire heated the fat layer under her skin, causing the fat to melt and soak into the clothing, turning her body into a candle that supplied fuel for itself. Police recorded at the scene a layer of grease on the floor, similar to the wax residue left after a candle burns completely. This reinforced the hypothesis that Mary fell asleep with her cigarette, causing the fire to smolder for hours through the night. But what's hard to believe is why the flame was strong enough to completely incinerate her body, yet surrounding furniture remained almost intact. To this day, Mary Reeser's case remains one of the most famous evidence for the phenomenon of spontaneous human combustion. Scientists still debate whether this was truly an accident caused by smoking and sleeping pills, or if there's some other mysterious mechanism yet to be explained. The photo you see, two men sweeping up the ash remains, is the final trace of one of the most frightening and mysterious phenomena of the 20th century. Fifth, this horrifying photo captures the moment a man rushed into a sea of flames at the Burning Man Festival in 2017. The main character is Aaron Joel, a freedom-loving man with a strong, extroverted personality. From a young age, Aaron left home to become independent, earning money with only one goal: to travel everywhere and experience new things. He enjoyed challenging activities like long-distance running, mountain climbing, and exploring nature. When he heard about the Burning Man Festival, the famous event held annually in the Black Rock Desert, Nevada, Aaron was immediately captivated. Burning Man lasts 9 days, attracting 70,000 to 80,000 people from around the world. This isn't just a music festival, but a place where people are free to create and build massive art installations. The special highlight is a giant wooden statue that's erected, and on the final day, it's burned in a grand ceremony called Burning Man. He drove to the desert with some friends, immersing himself in the colorful atmosphere, bizarre costumes, booming music, energetic people. Aaron seemed extremely excited, always ready to participate in every activity. September 3, the festival's final day. Tens of thousands of people gathered around the giant wooden statue, eagerly waiting for the moment it would burst into flames. Evening fell, fireworks lit up the sky, flames began to devour the effigy. Aaron stood in the front row, observing, chatting with friends. He said he would go to the other side to find some acquaintances. After that statement, he disappeared into the crowd. In the middle of the blazing fire, someone saw a figure rushing straight into the flames. Many people thought it was just a crazy performance, until the rescue team discovered Aaron collapsed in the remains of the wooden statue. His body burned with third-degree burns, covering 97% of his body. He was rushed to emergency care but didn't survive. A photographer happened to capture the fateful moment. The famous photo that followed, the image of Aaron running toward the sea of fire, as if compelled by an invisible force. The strange thing is that no one understands why he did it. Some people thought Aaron was drunk, but autopsy results showed he was completely sober. He showed no signs of depression and left no farewell message. To this day, Aaron's death remains a mystery that haunts the Burning Man community. No one knows the answer. Only that terrifying photo remains, evidence of one of the darkest moments in this festival's history.